Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
This is the third principle: acceptance of one another, an encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation. And I'd like you to take a few minutes to pause and think about what this means to you and to our congregation, especially in light of the program that we have today. And I found a Jewish proverb that I wanted to share. Before every person there walks an angel announcing, "Behold, the image of God." So now we have the opening words, which are in the hymn book. It matters what we believe. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged.
Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way to wider and deeper sympathies.
Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities.
Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness.
Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies.
Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern.
Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction.
Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration.
Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness.
Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth.
Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world.
Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. Sophia Lyon Foss.
Find a kindly word, may all who speak
The transitional words are in the back of the hymn book, 655, change alone is unchanging. Whosoever wishes to know about the world must learn about it in particular details.
Knowledge is not intelligence.
In searching for the truth, be ready for the unexpected.
Change alone is unchanging.
The same road goes both up and down.
The beginning of a circle is also its end.
Not I, but the world says it. All is one.
And yet everything comes in season.
And that is by Heraclitus of Ephesus. So our program today will be given by Spencer Bran. Spencer is a very important part of this congregation, and we welcome him as our speaker.
Oh my goodness. All right, so I wanted to first thank everyone for allowing me to speak today and for Julie for working with me. This has been a talk I've wanted to do for a while. So just thank you for that. And when I started to think about which subject to talk about, because I mean just the idea of the LGBTQIA plus community, that's expansive. I could talk for years, but I'm not. And I narrowed it down to two. I thought, okay, we could talk about the history, or we could talk about, more close to home, the pagan view of LGBTQIA plus people. And I pondered on it for a while. And eventually I thought, heck, I'll just do both. It'll make it multifaceted. So let's start with June. Many might be wondering, why is Pride Month such a big deal? What is it? And why is it in June? And the first question is a little bit complicated. The second question is very simple. So Pride Month is extremely powerful, both in history and in meaning. Pride Month, for many people, is a celebration of the LGBTQIA plus community, and I'll break down the acronym for you because a lot of people wonder what all of that is. And it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, intersex, asexual, or aromantic, and plus many other identities in our community. And the struggle we have had to get to where we are. Historically, the first Pride demonstration slash celebration slash parade was held on June 28th, 1970 in New York City on the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion of 1969. And on the subject of Stonewall, one thing I tend to take issue with, and many other people in the community, both older and younger, is when people frame Stonewall as the birth of what's called the gay rights movement. I will say it was incredibly important, and it was a major event in our history, no doubt. But there were rebellions and activists doing their thing years before Stonewall happened, at least 100 years actually. Not to mention that we're only talking about the movement here in the United States. Everywhere else it's different. But pre-Stonewall, our people have been around since the dawn of time. There are pieces of art and writing that depict same-sex love and gender nonconforming people from thousands of years ago. So it's nothing new. And some well-known figures that would probably be, because things had different terms thousands of years ago, that would probably be or are definitely considered part of our community today are Alexander the Great, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Caravaggio, Sappho, Oscar Wilde, Lord Alfred Douglas, Walt Whitman, and so many others too numerous to name. Some of those may have been a surprise, others maybe not so much. Most of us have learned about these people in school, but oddly enough, we didn't learn about that side of them, did we? And these were all people from over 100 years ago. Before Stonewall, we had more recently the Mattachine Society, a gay rights organization that was formed in 1950, around 19 years before Stonewall. The Jean Compton's cafeteria riots, a rebellion started by drag performers and trans people in San Francisco's Tenderloin district in August of 1966, just about 3 years before Stonewall. Both the other side of the country, both of those occurred. So you see, our history goes back at least 1,000 years. And I frequently see many people asking, why does there need to be a Pride Month? Why don't straight people get a month? There is a simple answer to this question. In history, cisgender and heterosexual people, which cisgender, for those who may not know, are those who identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. They have oftentimes not had to experience and have not had, they have not been subjected to discrimination, violence, and genocide for their sexual orientation or gender identity. When we look at television and everywhere around us, we see primarily cisgender and heterosexual representation. When we are born, we are assumed to be cisgender and heterosexual. This is damaging and difficult for those of us who are not. We have to open that conversation. We have had to go through so much strife to let it be known that we are who we are. We face immense struggle for simply being who we are. So much that as a 23-year-old person, I have to think about where I'm at and if it's safe to hold the hand of my significant other or wear a certain garment or be open about my gender identity. There have been 11-year-olds who have been attacked and assaulted by their peers simply for being their authentic selves and being part of our community. Trans people, primarily trans people of color, are murdered and attacked at shockingly high rates. People get away with murdering trans people because of what's called a panic defense. And that's where a cisgender person finds out someone is trans and murders them because they are supposedly so shocked. And they legitimately get away with it. And in many places, the panic defense is still legal and still holds up in court. A question for cisgender and heterosexual people. Do you have to look behind your shoulder just to hold your beloved's hand or worry about being murdered for your gender identity and how that relates to the gender you were assigned at birth? Because we do. And now I mentioned that I would talk about the pagan view on this subject. Because I am a pagan, I figured I know a lot about both. When most people think of paganism, we think it's an incredibly accepting religion. We think that it's accepting of all people. We're just a bunch of hippies. But unfortunately, in history, primarily Gardnerian Wiccan sects of paganism, have highly valued the male-female binary. Historically, gay couples were not allowed to practice rites together, or even in the coven. There have been some covens that restrict queer people from even joining. The sect of Dianic Wicca, trans women are not included in women-only covens. This is due to transphobic views from said covens. This does not mean, however, that all covens and pagan paths discriminate against our community. Thankfully, things have changed since the days of Gerald Gardner, who pioneered modern Wicca. Doreen Valiente, a witch and leader initiated by Gerald Gardner himself, once said this at a 1997 National Conference of the Pagan Federation on the 22nd of November of that year. She said, At first I did not question anything Gerald told me about what he claimed to be traditional teachings of the old religion. Eventually, however, I did begin to question and began to ask how much was traditional and how much was simply Gerald's prejudices. For instance, he was very much against people of the same sex working together, especially if they were gay. In fact, he went so far as to describe gay people as being cursed by the goddess. Well, I see no reason to believe this. In every period of history, in every country in the world, there have been gay people, both men and women. So why shouldn't Mother Nature have known what she was doing when she made people this way? I don't agree with this prejudice against gay people, either inside the craft of the wise or outside of it, end quote. Doreen was not alone in the stance whatsoever. In fact, I have old issues of an old pagan publication called New Witch Magazine that included columns on gay rights and gay pagans, and many readers wrote in expressing support for LGBTQIA plus pagans and our rights as human beings. In fact, there are sects, little traditions, that are specifically for LGBTQIA plus people, such as the Minoan Brotherhood, a tradition founded in 1975 by Eddie Buczynski for men who love men. The Minoan Sisterhood, founded a year later by Lady Rhea and Lady Sekhmet, who worked closely with Buczynski prior to his passing in March of 1989, the sisterhood being for women who love women. The Fellowship of the Phoenix, being founded in 2004 for men who love men that are of diverse traditions, it has since started to include people of all parts of the community. There are many other paths like this and many other more traditional Wiccan paths that do not follow the bigoted views of their predecessors and instead include pagans of any orientation and gender identity. And there's a liturgical poem used in many paths across the globe. It's called The Charge of the Goddess, and we actually have a part of it in the back of our hymnal, funnily enough. And it's by Doreen Valiente, and the one in our hymnal was adapted by Starhawk. And it says, "For mine is the ecstasy of the Spirit, and mine is also the joy on earth. For my law is love unto all beings," not just some beings, not just straight beings, not just cis beings, but all beings, it says. And it also states, "Let my worship be within the heart that rejoiceth, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals." And that's the charge of the goddess. And for centuries, our community has faced discrimination and violence. For centuries, we have been told that we are unnatural or ill. To this day, parents send their queer kids to what is called conversion therapy. This has led to so many young and old queer people taking their own lives due to the trauma they experienced there. In history, queer people have been sent to institutions to be shocked and tortured, until they give into being untrue to themselves. It still goes on, it is not stopped, and in most states, conversion therapy is still legal. And to this day, our community faces attacks in terms of legislation. This is no secret. This is not new either. In history, we have had to face people trying to and successfully passing laws that attempt to make it illegal for us to be who we are, and laws that discriminate. Oscar Wilde was amongst the most famous people who were tried and convicted for gay activity. His book of letters, De Profundis, was written while he was imprisoned. Before the Holocaust, gay people were convicted in Germany for homosexual acts under paragraph 175. The paragraph was later broadened and expanded to include any lewd act between same-sex people by the Nazis. During the Holocaust, queer people were sent to concentration camps. Most were forced to wear a pink triangle that was later reclaimed by our community and used as a symbol of resistance. And many lesbians were imprisoned as antisocials. Over 10,000 homosexual men were sent to concentration camps, and only 40% of all queer people sent survived. And a great book to read on this subject is The Men with the Pink Triangle by Heinz Hager, who was a survivor of the camps. And this did not end with the liberation of the camps and the defeat of the Nazis. Many who were branded by the pink triangle were merely imprisoned elsewhere under the same charges. And here in the States, we weren't innocent. We had sodomy laws as well. In fact, it wasn't until 2003 that the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that sodomy laws were unconstitutional. And to put this into perspective, I was already in school when that happened. When Lawrence versus Texas was decided upon in 2003, 14 states still had sodomy laws. And around the same time, we had, more recently, I should say, Don't Ask, Don't Tell protected closeted military personnel from discrimination or harassment, but it also banned openly queer people from serving. This was not repealed until 2011. I know quite a few people who were affected by it, and many will still not talk about the trauma that it caused them because it is just too sensitive of a subject. At around the same time, we had Proposition 8, or as we used to call it, Prop 8, that attempted to ban same-sex marriage. It wasn't fully struck down until 2013. I was already out at the time, and I remember having to worry about it. When I came out, we still did not have the legal right to marry here in Indiana. In fact, I didn't honestly believe that I would see the day where it would be legal nationwide for same-sex people to marry each other. I remember marching, protesting, and fighting for just that right. I remember couples like Edie Windsor and Thea Spire, who were both of Jewish descent that I found, which, is amazing, going to court for their right to marry. And sadly, both have passed since then. But at least Edie Windsor got to see the day that it was legal for her to marry who she loved. And since then, we have come quite a way. We have made progress. In 2015, we gained the right for same-sex couples to marry nationwide. I remember sitting at home and watching Let's Make a Deal. I had my hair up in a towel because I had just showered. It was a summer. And I was watching Let's Make a Deal, and then it came on the news, breaking news, and at first I thought, they can't do that. They can't interrupt Let's Make a Deal. I want to see Wayne Brady. And then it came on the screen. Supreme Court rules in favor of same-sex marriage, and I wept. Tears of joy. And I called my friends on the phone to see if they'd heard. Now that that's happened, many people think our struggles are done and that we shouldn't be talking about it anymore, because you got the right to marry. What do you have to worry about now? Fast forward 1 year later. June 12th, 2016, our community faced a devastating blow. The Pulse nightclub, a gay nightclub, was hosting Latin night during Pride Month when a man began shooting those attending. By the end of it, 49 people were dead, 50 including the perpetrator, and 58 were injured. Gay men in Orlando could not donate blood to save the survivors and are still not legally allowed to donate blood if they are sexually active. I remember watching the news coverage on CNN, and I was just shocked to see what had happened. And I remember us holding a vigil here in Terre, Haute at the circular ISU monument on 3rd and Cherry. I remember everyone weeping and holding each other. It happened during Pride Month to a gay club on Latin night. It struck fear and pain into the hearts of queer communities all over the nation, but it absolutely devastated the Orlando community most of all. Now we are in a time that lawmakers are attacking trans people with discriminatory legislation. Our nation is experiencing a wave of blatant and violent transphobia. Trans people are still being attacked and murdered on the streets. Trans people face discrimination from medical professionals. Certain political parties, who I will not name, are bitter and are fighting tooth and nail to get payback by attacking the rights of LGBTQIA plus people. Non-binary people are still not allowed to, or they're still not recognized by most government offices. In fact, we used to have the option for a third gender marker change, but I've read that that's since been taken away. And sexually active men who love men are still not allowed to donate blood. From my knowledge, I don't think there has been a formal apology from our government for the way they handled the HIV crisis. An administration in the 80s, for the most part, ignored the crisis. At the time, AIDS was called GRID, which stood for Gay-Related Immune Deficiency. So needless to say, most people, including the president at the time, would not talk about it. It wasn't until thousands of lives were affected, many lost, that our government stepped in. Many lives were lost because it wasn't taken as seriously as it should have. Queer women, a great many of them lesbians, had to take care of their sick and dying friends. Just this past week, I saw something amazing. President Joe Biden released a statement recognizing the 40th year of the HIV epidemic. And he mentioned the limited action by government officials and the public. Thankfully, medicine has gotten better since then, and people can now live relatively normal lives after being infected by HIV and testing positive. What we still have to work on is bettering resources for people with HIV, in fighting the stigma that comes with a positive diagnosis. Oftentimes I see pride parades with nothing about the AIDS epidemic. I think it's because we want to shy away from it, distance ourselves, but we have a lot of people in our community who are positive. I have friends, actually, who are HIV positive, and they deserve respect and love just as anyone else does. They are people and should be treated with dignity. The stigma and misinformation honestly has to stop. And a lot of this may seem like doom and gloom. And a lot of what you've heard here today has been a darker side of our community. Because we have faced a great lot. But I don't want the focus of Pride to be what happened to us, but instead, how we acted in those times. Such as Magnus Hirschfeld and the Institute of Sexual Sciences in Berlin left a vast history of wealth and information on same-sex attraction and transitioning for trans people. And I should just say, this was in the late 1800s up till the 30s. And they left all this information even after the Nazis burned their books and research papers in the streets. They left all this information. There's actually a short film that survived, and it's on YouTube. I forget the name of it, but it's a wonderful piece of history. And also, gay people thrived in Berlin before the Nazis even came into power, even under the paragraph 175. There was a thriving gay community in Berlin in the 20s. And our figures in history like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, two trans women of color who were at Stonewall, and the other Stonewall veterans still lived their lives authentically, and they gathered together and partied and sang Judy Garland songs. Even when it was illegal for them to even dress as they wanted and love who they wanted. Even when they were beaten and assaulted on the streets and the police would raid the bars, which was the start of Stonewall, by the way. And we marched in the streets and celebrated even when it was dangerous to. In the 80s, organizations like ACT UP brought visibility and awareness to an epidemic that was being systematically ignored. We have fought and won the right to marry who we love. In some places, government offices are offering a third gender marker option. We keep fighting, living, loving, and celebrating no matter what we face. This is us, this is our history. We've always risen up. This shows our power and resilience, our strength as a community. And so, many might be thinking, where do we go from here? How do we get better? I got a few recommendations. For the cisgender heterosexuals who are listening, please listen to people in our community and fight for us when we are facing attacks, such as in legislation right now. And don't be silent. And also, don't just show up for pride parades when it's fun and lively and we're having a big old party, but also show up and be with us when we mourn on Trans Day of Remembrance, which is held every year on November 20th, to mourn trans people who have been murdered on the streets, many who have not been brought justice. And for my fellow LGBTQIA plus people, keep fighting, not just for your particular letter, but for all members of the community. We don't need transphobia from the LGB areas, and we don't need homophobia from trans and gender nonconforming people either. Keep fighting together hand in hand, as most of our history has been. As our beloved Marsha P. Johnson once said, "No pride for some of us without revolution for all of us." And for older generations in the community, try to listen to younger generations and also hand down your stories, your knowledge and experiences. Share our history because a lot of kids out there need a mentor. For younger generations, I mean, one's younger than me, learn your history. Listen to older generations when they share, and help inform them on information you know. In my wonderful middle generation, connect the two. Be that bridge between older generations and the younger. Learn from both, and then lead, because this is our prime. We need to be fighting actively. And for everyone, keep fighting against the bigoted legislation. Rise up, stand together, be kind, listen, learn, celebrate, love, and have a wonderful Pride Month, and keep it through the rest of the year. Don't let it stop. And to end, in the words of the amazing, fabulous, and beautiful Janet Mock, a trans woman, author, and wonderful person in our community, self-definition and self-determination is about many varied decisions that we make to compose and journey towards ourselves. It is okay if your personal definition is in a constant state of flux as you navigate the world. And lastly, in the words of Harvey Milk, hope will never be silent. Thank you. Happy Pride.
Closing words are number 559. Someday, men and women will rise. They will reach the mountain peak They will meet big and strong and free, ready to receive, to partake, and to bask in the golden rays of love. What fancy, what imagination, what poetic genius can foresee the potentialities of such a force in the life of men and women? And this is by Emma Goldman.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace, know that you are loved and that your life is sacred.